welcome back to the United Stand. I am joined by transfer expert Ben Jacobs. And Ben, it's great to catch up.
Great to be back. I'm live from New York, if you haven't guessed by my phenomenal background, which is real rather than AI.
Exactly. You know what I was thinking at first? Is it a green screen or is it the Big Apple, New York? I'm very jealous.
Just Times Square.
Yeah, amazing place. I mean, Ben, it's great to have you back on. I've been on holiday myself. Yeah, I mean, you're not on holiday, you're just always working away, but, you know, that's what you get when you're as good as you are. It's being the greatest transfer expert and on the United Stand as well. So let's get into it. Starting off, Ben, this morning, you know, I'm back from my holidays. I'm thinking, have we signed Mbeumo? Of course we've not. And then I see that Newcastle are about to swoop in for Wissa from Brentford. I mean, how could this affect the Mbeumo deal for Manchester United? Because we've heard before that if Wissa does exit Brentford, then it's going to be even more difficult for Manchester United to get that go-ahead on Mbeumo, and the price might rise even further.
I think that's true. Brentford's preference is not to lose Bryan Mbeumo and Johan Wissa in the same window. Wissa's a slightly different situation because he's only got 1 year left in his contract, but Brentford have got a club option to extend. They value him at in excess of 50 million. And we know that Manchester United are struggling now to agree a full package for Bryan Mbeumo, and the price and the goalposts keep changing. I think we have to be a bit fair to Manchester United. They're trying to be disciplined and not bid 5, 6, 7 times and just pay what it takes to get the deal done, because you'll find in the market all other prices just rise with that approach, which is in Jason Wilcox's mind the Manchester United of old. So the situation with Wissa first is that you have Newcastle, because they've lost out on the race for Hugo Ekitike. It looks like Liverpool are going to get that one done, and Spurs, who have the Thomas Frank factor, and also Nottingham Forest, who have placed a bid in the region of £25 million, and Brentford are being difficult and they want double that. Although, again, that 1 year ability to extend the contract does protect Wissa's value. So this might be good news in a backhanded way for Manchester United, because it's going to force them to act in this window between now and Tuesday when they head off to America for their pre-season tour. And if they sit back and allow Wissa to advance, then it does make the Mbeumo deal a whole lot harder, even though the player only wants Manchester United. Where are we at with Mbeumo? Well, there were reports yesterday that backed up mine and Alex Crook's reporting that even Brentford people, and certainly those at Manchester United, expected that medical. Expected doesn't mean it's definitively going to happen, but all parties were close. And then the goalposts have moved again. So first we had a 70 million alleged bid from Spurs that is denied by Spurs. And if that bid was made, you would think it would have been accepted, and it wasn't. So there's a grey area there. My understanding is no bid was placed, but that was the day after Thomas Frank became Spurs manager. Then you had that 3-week period where Manchester United waited to bid with more confidence second time around. 55 million, 7.5 million in add-ons. So it matched the Cunha valuation, but the add-ons were not all gettable. And Brentford said, we want 62.5 million in whichever way you can do it, but a guaranteed 62.5 million. So either a higher fixed fee or more gettable add-ons. Then the parties felt that they were going to reach an agreement somewhere between 62.5 and 65 million, which is where we got to the reporting that a medical was perhaps expected. And then the goalposts have moved again, and Brentford keep changing the structure, changing the valuation. And some of that is the fact that Manchester United, by taking time, have inadvertently allowed other deals to get done. So Brentford are saying, Alanga 55, we definitely want 65 fixed all of a sudden. And other deals like Morgan Gibbs-White, release clause at 60 million. They feel that Mbeumo, whether rightly or wrongly, should be more, even though these are not identical profiles. So I think a lot will be made of Manchester United being slow and just not paying what it takes. But increasingly, in the last sort of 7 days or so, there hasn't been as much of a what it takes as there were 2 or 3 weeks ago, because Brentford are being more bullish, knowing also that if they delay, they might have the opportunity to bring in Wissa money, and then maybe the Mbeumo deal becomes that little bit harder to do. So that sounds pessimistic, but the flip side is Manchester United will know there is urgency. They've always wanted to resolve it before they go on tour to America. So perhaps finally this is the week when Manchester United get full clarity one way or the other on Mbeumo, knowing if they don't, they're at a disadvantage if they let these other clubs like Newcastle advance on Wissa first.
I mean, it seems to me, Ben, and I understand your point, it is difficult when Brentford are moving the goalpost, but the goalpost wouldn't have needed to be moved if Manchester United would have acted quickly in the first place. I mean, I thought the first bid was just way under what Mbeumo is worth. And then it took quite a while to put that second one in, and then it just feels like, I think it's just over 7 weeks now that this has been going on. I mean, it's really tough for Manchester United fans because this is a player we'd be so excited about, but because it's gone on for so long, if it does finally happen, everyone feels like, okay, it's about time. Where in reality, it'd be an absolutely amazing signing. He's a great player, but you see all of these other players that haven't actually quite got the same statistics as Mbeumo going for good money, and you can understand Brentford's point of view on that one. I mean, from the Mbeumo side, it seems like he's remained extremely professional. Is he trying to push it on his side, do you know?
Well, he's already made it clear that he only wants Manchester United. Brentford are aware of his desire to leave, but he's not going to go on strike. He's not going to do what Victor Gyökeres did. He's a top professional, which is a good thing because you want a player that you're signing to be the right character as well in the dressing room. And although it's great sometimes to a football fan when a player goes on strike or issues a statement saying he wants to leave, we saw it with Moises Caicedo when he went to Chelsea. There's a bit of a clue potentially as to what a player might be like if things don't go right at the club he's joining as well. So Mbeumo's just kept his head down. He's training hard. He's staying loyal to Brentford. But he has said professionally and emphatically he wants to go to Manchester United. And this is why Manchester United have been disciplined and have taken their time. And although I understand the fan frustration, who you get in a window is only really to be judged at the end of the window. If it happens today, then people can get a bit more sleep and keep a bit more hair. But by the same token, if it happens in a day, in a week, in the context of a Manchester United career, clearly getting the player is the most important thing. And I can understand why Manchester United are saying, one, based on all the talks we had in that 3 weeks between bid 1 and bid 2, our bid was fair. Number 2, Brentford fed back and engaged. So Manchester United feel the goalposts have moved. We have to be respectful to Brentford. This is normal in negotiation. It's not fun when you're on the buying side and you can't quite get it over the line. But Brentford are being tough negotiators. You'd expect that. And then probably the other factor in all of this is that Manchester United have not had a rival for Mbeumo, which has led them to believe they can take their time. And up until today, that's been a really key point. And now, in a perverse way, they do have a rival, even though it's not a club for Mbeumo. It's a rival in the sense that if any of these other clubs get Wissa first, then Manchester United are at a disadvantage all of a sudden. But until the Wissa situation developed, I think Manchester United's belief, whether rightly or wrongly, was that Mbeumo is going to go before Wissa. Wissa would be the one that had a deal closed to him. And there's no other clubs bidding for Mbeumo because everyone knows he wants Manchester United. So they were in quite a strong position. But now we have to understand whether Wissa's situation actually panics Manchester United a bit into action, into paying a bit more, or whether at the opposite extreme, they're just prepared to walk away and put that money on somebody else.
Well, Ben, as you were talking there, I don't know if you've had any information come through at this moment in time. It has just come out from David Ornstein that Manchester United have made an improved bid to sign Bryan Mbeumo from Brentford. New offer worth around 65 million fixed plus 5 million in add-ons. Manchester United awaiting Brentford response as they work to close a deal for Mbeumo. Maybe they've been pushed into action because of the Wissa interest from Newcastle.
Well, obviously we're live, and I'll send a few messages if you don't mind whilst we're live to try and stand up information. But this was always the expectation. It's exactly what I just said a moment ago, that Manchester United, in a backhanded way, can benefit from this interest in Wissa because of the point that I made, that Wissa and Mbeumo are not two players that Brentford want to lose in the same window. And as a consequence, Manchester United kick themselves into gear potentially, knowing they've got to get Mbeumo done before Wissa is done. So if as you say, David Ornstein's report is accurate, and I'll try and stand that up for you in the next few moments whilst we're live, then a third bid's gone in. If that bid is 65 plus 5, then that meets the 70 million valuation. I would imagine that the add-ons in the 5 will not be particularly gettable to the point where Manchester United is still around this fixed number of 65. And there's your urgency. There's potentially your resolution to the saga. And it will be a surprise, in my opinion. But again, give me sort of 10 minutes during this show to also put my head down and send some messages. But it'd be a surprise to me if at that number, a deal is not completed.
Absolutely. Well, Ben, thank you very much for that information. I mean, getting some news while we're live is always good because we have you on hand to go and check it out. So you go and send a few messages and I'll bring in some super chats while you do that. And yeah, we'll get some information. But 65 million plus 5 million, United taking some action after it seems like Newcastle were going for Wissa from Brentford. It spurred them on to up their bid. So let's see if Ben could get us any information on that. We have some super chats coming in though. It's great to see everyone in the chat and in the community. I've missed you all since I've been away. It's only been just over a week, but it feels like it's been so much longer. Jacob Fatu says, let's go. This is thanks to Ben's aura.
I told you in a backhanded way the Wissa thing would influence things. But also, can I just say, we heard a lot of reports, and I respect other journalists about golf and valuation, about pessimism. And I come back to what I said before. Manchester United want to get this deal done before they fly off to America. It's a common pattern with a number of clubs at this stage of the window. So it isn't a surprise that they're maybe now paying what they think it takes to get this deal done. And as a consequence, it might be good news for Manchester United that they have had some competitive tension due to other clubs turning to Wissa, leading finally to this deal getting done.
Well, if it happens, and I'm not going to say it's going to because it's Manchester United, you never do know. Thank you, Newcastle. Thank you, Newcastle. Give us a little bit of money in getting a Langer with our sell-on fee and then pushing that Mbeumo deal over the line, hopefully. We have loads of people talking in the chat, so thank you, everyone. We have Mario's with a super chat in there. You have Jay Houston saying, I've been saying Brian and Mbeumo won't be joining Manchester United since the transfer window opened. So far, I'm right. I mean, that was clearly before we got the news through. Ross Stevens says, check David Ornstein's post. We've done that one. Adrian C says, 65 million fixed plus add-ons is too much. I actually think if you look at the market, and like you were mentioning before, Ben, about all the different, players out there that are seemingly going for quite high fees. You look at Elanga, you look at Kudus, you look at Gibbs White potentially going to Spurs. And I actually think what Brentford are asking for Mbeumo is very fair. He was the best performing right winger in the league after Mo Salah, who's just on a ridiculous level, and people were talking about him being a Ballon d'Or winner potentially at points in the season. So, and Mbeumo being valued at 70 million for what he's providing to the Premier League, I think is quite fair, to be honest with you. Slow Sports News says, wow, Beth, while you are live, that's amazing. Well, all I'm saying is I go away for a week, nothing happens, I'm back for 5 minutes and suddenly we're getting a third bid. But Ben, have you managed to send anything? I know it's quite quick, but...
Yeah, I'm getting a few messages back that the story is correct regarding the bid. What I'm trying to establish now is if it's been accepted at the Brentford end, which is obviously the most important part. Like I said before, my gut instinct from asking sources even before today was that if there was a 65 million fixed part to the bid, then that would stand a chance. Because as we said at the beginning of the show, 62.5 was the first goalpost. Manchester United didn't bid that number because the add-ons were not all gettable. They bid 55 plus 7.5. Now we move on 62.5 to 65 being the ballpark for a deal. And Manchester United have decided to go with 65 as the fixed part of the fee, which is a good thing because they've not gone on the lower end. And then the add-ons on top just take it to a number in this inflated market. And with other players that you reference, where Manchester United will now feel it's more than competitive. And ultimately, if Brentford's number was ever 70, and it was supposedly 70 fixed 4 weeks ago, then now they've hit that number. So they've hit the Cunha number, and now they've hit the 70 number. But my feeling is, just sending a few messages whilst we're live, that those 5 million in add-ons will not all be gettable, which means Manchester United may still feel like the total package is close to 65 if it's accepted. And obviously from Brentford's point of view, they'll be able to bill it as getting the 70 million number that they always wanted. So it will be a surprise now, given Mbeumo also wants the move, if this bid either isn't accepted or forms the basis to finesse and finalise, because of course, just because you hit the valuation, you've still got to also hit the structure as well. So let's see whether it's just an outright acceptance, which is the thing that I'm trying to find out now. And then from there, if it isn't accepted, let's see whether it's just small details that are going to get this deal over the line. But I think it'd be a big, big surprise now if Mbeumo isn't a Manchester United player by early next week.
Yeah, I think I completely agree with you. Obviously, you have the contacts and you have the information, but from a fan point of view, I mean, if you bin 65 million, which was the Cunha price, and then with the 5 million add-ons, of course, they might not all be gettable, like you've just revealed to us here on the show. For Brentford, it's a great look. For Manchester United, it's the 65 million that they paid for Cunha, around that mark. So it's a good look for both clubs. I'd be very, very shocked if this deal doesn't happen. And plus, if Brentford rejects it, I think Manchester United will be in a spot where they think, I mean, where do we go from here? Because we need to get this deal done before the US tour. And then when you get past the 70 million, I understand it's add-ons, it does start to become a bit of a bad look for Manchester United when they've been negotiating for quite a long time, and the price has never gone above 70 when it's been in talks with multiple journalists and yourself, especially on this show. But let's see what happens there. If you have any news come to you, Ben, during the show, feel free to cut me off and just get into it. Do not worry about that.
I'm frantically typing away and messaging away, so not being rude if I'm glancing down at my phone, but I'm sure those listening would rather have up-to-date information and developments. So as far as I'm aware, the bid only went in this morning, and the response of Brentford hasn't been given to Manchester United, but Manchester United view this third bid as a final bid, and they will walk away, therefore, if it isn't either accepted or finessed. So there's a slight grey area in the sense you could reject it, but you could reject it simply based on saying, we want 65 million in different payment terms, or we want 5 million in different add-ons. But that's not really a rejection. It's saying we've got the framework of a deal, we just need to kind of finesse it. But if, for example, Brentford come back, I'm told, and say that 70 million package is not good enough, we now want 75 or whatever, you're still nowhere near, then at that point I'm told Manchester United will walk away.
Wow, well, let's see what happens on that. I mean, we have got other topics that we want to discuss, and of course, Ben, you know, it's fine to kind of be multitasking. I've been doing that as well. Multiple messages coming in as we speak, but we also have a lot of people reacting to this news. You have John saying, top tier journalist who needs his own version of the here we go. Oh, I think he's talking about you there, Ben, on that one. Harris says, Ben...
Very kind of you.
Ben on my screen is always wonderful. Javier says it's all about the game and how you play it, all about control and if you take it, all about debt and if you can pay it. I think it's a little bit of a sequence there talking about Manchester United. Nolan Boyson says, Beth bringing the necessary look that we need. Mojo says, 28 goals, 7 assists, 70 million is a fair price, just that our owners are a nightmare to deal with. Hitton Chowdhury says, surely this is a take it or leave it. Well, Ben's just said that Manchester United would be willing to walk away if Brentford moved the goalposts again. Keel Robinson says, so we talked ourselves out of 10 million with a laughing face. I mean, and Rob Always United has said, great to see you back, Beth. Thank you everyone for your kind chats there. We'll get round to them. I mean, like we just discussed with Ben, I mean, multiple players leaving their clubs for significant fees during that window of space where Manchester United are trying to negotiate. Obviously, you know, did throw a bit of a spanner in the works in the negotiations between Manchester United and Brentford. I mean, just on that, I mean, it feels strange to move away from the Mbeumo deal, but until we get any further updates, I think it's best to, you know, bring in some other news as well, Ben, if you don't mind.
Yeah, of course, let's do it.
Okay, so I wanted to ask you about Martinez from Aston Villa. There was news coming out this morning that he might have a release clause in his contract of 21.6 million. That was coming from Argentina, and that Manchester United have reignited their interest in him, and talks are ongoing. I mean, what is your information on Martinez? Does he have the release clause? Are Manchester United interested in going back in for him now that the Onana injuries come to light?
Yeah, the Onana injury will influence the goalkeeper situation. It may result in a scenario where they add another keeper, perhaps a young one, though. Emi Martinez would obviously only join Manchester United as a number one. And whilst Onana is at the club, it's perhaps harder. And even with Onana injured for between 4 and 6 weeks with a hamstring injury, he's not been told directly that he's surplus to requirements yet. So that would have to happen too. But there's certainly something in Emi Martinez and Manchester United, because on the player side, they're pushing it hard and indicating that he would like to leave Villa for Manchester United. But at this stage, it's kind of Martinez courting Manchester United, not necessarily Manchester United advancing on Martinez. We've heard some reports from Argentina, from people I respect, saying there are club-to-club talks. Again, that's not my understanding at this stage. Manchester United are still not moving on Martinez, and they won't unless Onana departs. And it's a bit harder to have that conversation with Onana, and if they chose to facilitate an exit, now he's injured as well. So I think it might be quite difficult for Emi Martinez to end up at Manchester United, at least in this earlier part of the window. Once again, as I revealed and broke, Martinez wants Manchester United. Martinez is hoping somehow a deal comes off, but Manchester United are not reciprocating at the moment. And still, I think the priority is going to be more around a young goalkeeper without a buy-in deal in mind. And right now, the more concrete talks are around Botafogo's John Victor. So there's going to be a lot about Emi Martinez. And again, if anything develops with Onana, then yes, there might be a story there. But right now, I don't think we're talking about Manchester United biting or bidding, because still it appears that Onana is more likely to stay at the club. And let's see whether that changes between now and the end of the window. But right now, it's all about Martinez courting Manchester United, and it's less about Manchester United courting Martinez.
A player that wants to join us, Ben. I mean, great news for a Manchester United fan who isn't used to that feeling right now, apart from obviously Mbeumo and Cunha, who, if they get over the line with Mbeumo, would be brilliant deals to do. I mean, so you talked about John Victor there, him being an option from Botafogo. I mean, I heard some rumours that Manchester United were considering bringing Vitek back. Have you heard anything about that?
Nothing really at my end at this stage. I think the goalkeeper situation isn't going to be as much of a priority. Clearly, they want to get Mbuemo over the line, and then let's see what direction they travel. It will be outgoings focused, and then I think they'll be looking for a number 9. Goalkeeper's important, but if they decide it's a number 2, less urgency to do it right now. And that's why I think that there'll be other focuses and priorities, and ultimately ways of allocating their budget. If you wanted to go for Emi Martinez now, or a big name number 1, you got to find big budget. Emi Martinez is 30 million plus in likelihood. The release clause that you mentioned has been floated, but I'm not aware of the specific amount at this stage, or that he has one that's necessarily active right now. Sometimes these release clauses come and go. Sometimes they're active a bit later in the contract. So we have to wait and see if there's a mechanism for getting Martinez cheaper. But either way, that's an expensive deal. And if Manchester United have that budget, I think they're next going to pool it towards finding a number 9 and then focus on these outgoings. So the goalkeeper front is quite quiet at the moment.
I mean, is there anything on the number 9 at the minute, Ben? I know Gyökeres is about to join Arsenal and probably going to face Manchester United, maybe even score against us on the opening day of the season, who knows? But do you know if Manchester United do have any strong number 9 top targets for when they do get, hopefully, the Mbeumo deal over the line, and if they do have that money left over to prioritise the spend on that position?
Yeah, I still think that we might see some legs in the Benjamin Sesko saga. Manchester United went for him 12 months ago. He's not going to Arsenal because of Victor Gyökeres. Chelsea are one to watch to some extent. They actually ruled out Sesko because they've got Liam Delap and Nicholas Jackson. But naturally, if Nicholas Jackson departs, then suddenly they've not got two profiles in the mould of Šeško. They've only got one because João Pedro is a little bit more versatile. So there may be a scenario where Manchester United revisit the Šeško situation. You've still got Ollie Watkins as well. The price that Villa are asking for is quite high, around 60 million. But let's see whether that drops throughout the window, especially if, for example, Villa are to move for a striker of their own, potentially Nicholas Jackson at Chelsea. Then the likes of Dominic Calvert-Lewin or others in his mould are kind of more opportunism later in the window. And again, like Martinez, they're not really driven by the club. They're more offered on the player side. So we're going to hear a lot of links, a lot of names, a lot of possibilities, but these are very much pushed on Manchester United, and you can't stop that from agents. But it doesn't mean that Manchester United are saying, yeah, we want Dominic Calvert-Lewin. There is substance to the internal discussion and appreciation for Nicholas Jackson. Whether it develops remains to be seen. But obviously, if Man U come for Jackson, you might expect Chelsea to explore Garnacho, and perhaps that kind of mirrored business would suit all parties. Mateta's another that they've spoken about, but I'm not aware of Crystal Palace wanting to let him go. It might be more Eze that departs. And still, I come back to what I said before about the late window opportunity to do what John Duran did from Al Nassr, going on loan to Fenerbahce. And remember, he was offered to Manchester United as well. Maybe there's a chance of Mitrovic as a short-term option on a loan, because Al Hilal want a number 9. If they get a number 9, they're looking to get rid of Mitrovic. So there's two kind of categories of strikers. And I think it's worth making this very clear, because bits will get taken out of context on social media and the fan base may have a meltdown. You got striker number 1, you're long-term, relatively young, likely big money, needs to be funded by outgoings. That's a sort of Šeško type profile, a Watkins type profile, even though he, of course, isn't young, but I don't think they're so rigid. But ideally young. Hugo Ekitike was obviously discussed, but it looks like he's going to Liverpool. Then you've got option number 2 of someone maybe they can get economically as a squad player. Maybe they're a little bit older. Maybe there's just a market chance because a player wants to leave. Can they do that at value? And I don't think your Calvert-Lewins, even though I'm not aware Manchester United have bit, or your Mitrovic's are instead of a Šeško. I think it's just Manchester United debating, can they get a big money striker? How much money do they need to bring in to do it? And then if they get into the late part of the window and they can bolster with another striker, or of course, if they get to the late part of the window and they don't have a striker, can they then turn their attention to some of these other targets, which might be seen as a bit of a panic buy. But if they're free transfers or loans and you just have need at that point, then why not? But it doesn't mean at this stage that any of them are like leading targets.
Yeah, it is interesting to see the options that are left out there for Manchester United. I mean, I really like Mateta, but it doesn't feel like Manchester United have started to develop on that one whatsoever. It's good to hear that he is still a name. I mean, I saw something earlier that Ekitike rejected Manchester United, but I mean, I don't know if you want to correct me here. To me, it feels like Manchester United aren't in a position to even go full throttle for a player like that as of now. They probably need to wait a little bit for outgoings, and by then, Liverpool will have wrapped that deal up, as it seems, as I saw your report earlier on that actually about Ekitike and Liverpool. So it's interesting as each striker comes off the market where Manchester United do begin to pivot to on the striker. Nicholas,
sorry, go on. To give you a little bit of breaking news at my end, and sorry if I'm distracted, but naturally, as important to get accurate.
Take it away with the breaking news, Ben.
And speak to sources. So I can add to the Mbeumo story that not only are Manchester United optimistic, but that Mbeumo has told Brentford he thinks the offer is fair and wants to leave. So this is not necessarily I'm going on strike because he's a model professional. He'll continue to train. He'll continue to respect Brentford. But it has been communicated to Brentford that he thinks that number and bid is good enough, and he wants to make the move, and he wants to make the move by Tuesday so he can go to the pre-season tour in America. Still, Manchester United are waiting on a response from Brentford. Again, it's not just about the number, but it is construed by sources that I'm speaking to whilst we are live as a final bid. In other words, once again, to reiterate, this isn't taken out of context. If Brentford turn around and technically reject it, but say there's just a few small points, then it's a rejection by name, but by nature it's not, because you're just finessing the package. So we may get in that situation where they say it's not quite good enough, but if you do X, Y, and Z, it will be. But if they outright turn around and say, no, you're still nowhere near our valuation or structure, then at that point, I am told by sources that Manchester United will walk away.
Wow, thank you very much for bringing that to us. Just when we were talking about Mbeumo and whether he was kind of trying to force this move through, like you have just stated there, it's not the same situation as Gyökeres where he's not going to turn up to train and it's a complete fallout, but it's just a little bit of a push maybe in Brentford's direction to be like, let me leave now, you've got the package that you wanted, I've been patiently waiting for a long time and I want to make my move. And I think it's always a good thing when the player remains professional but also indicates to the club his desires, and it does help out on the Manchester United side to try and get this deal over the line. And as much as I have backed Brentford's corner in saying that their evaluation is fair and Mbeumo is a top performer in the Premier League, I do think when you're reaching a deal with add-ons to get it to 70 million, it is time to wrap up this deal. I mean, as a United fan, I'm going to say that, but I do think what we've offered now is probably the first bid where I thought that is actually a really fair deal on Brentford's half, and I think it's still a good deal for Manchester United.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think that there is a need in the market now for Manchester United to resolve this and not paint themselves as a club that can just be left all window to go up and up and up and up. Now, when you look at it, you might say that it's quite a big jump to start at 45 guaranteed and to end at 65 guaranteed. That's not ideal. But I think the first bid was more just cursory to start a conversation. I think the second bid was the true nature of what they're prepared to pay. And now they've gone up by 10 million as far as the fixed fee is concerned. And they will expect that that's competitive enough to get this one over the line with the player buy-in. And I think Mbeumo stressing again, he wants to leave and he wants to leave quickly is definitely going to help Manchester United's cause. But again, we have to be respectful to Brentford. We have to say that they've handled this very well from their end. They've got the number that they were looking for. Let's see if they've got the structure as well, in which case the bid is going to be accepted. So I would keep an eye on this one moving very quickly now. As I've reported many times, Manchester United and Brentford both thought that there was a deal to be had there and to be finalised last week, and to get that medical done. Then it had to pivot a little bit towards this, do the medical and complete the deal before America if possible. Then it's pivoted again in Brentford's favour because of the fact that there's heavy interest in Wissa as well. And I think Manchester United probably learned in the last 24, 48 hours that Spurs are really pushing, that Newcastle are expected to place a bid, and they wanted to make absolutely sure that they got this deal done before Wissa. So let's see if they succeed now. And the reason why they want to get it done before Wissa is not just because of that Brentford preference or position not to lose both in the same window. It's also down to the fact that Yoane Wissa may also have this high number and this tough negotiation. And if that happens, Manchester United fans will realise that it isn't on Manchester United. It isn't only about Jason Wilcox and Chris Vivell and how they've handled this. It's Brentford and how they've negotiated. And imagine if Wissa, with only a year at the moment, maybe 2 years, because they will just extend the contract to protect the value. Imagine if he goes for 55 million, then suddenly Mbeumo at 65 fixed looks like a pretty decent bit of business. Imagine if it's even more for Wissa, then Manchester United, if they weren't pushing with urgency, might be in a position where they had to go even higher. And this is why I think now they understand that in this market, Noni Madueke, 52 million, Anthony Elanga, 65 million, Matheus Cunha, 62.5 million. But there was a release clause. If there wasn't a release clause, he might be 70, 75 million. So there's a lot of business. Not all these players are identical, but there's a lot of business with versatile attackers, number 10s, wingers, Garnacho at 60 million, even though there's a kind of issue between the club and the player forcing him out. That price hasn't dropped either. So at the end of the day, this might feel like a chore in that Manchester United have gone up by 20 million from their first offer. But the reality is that in this current market, whether you call it inflated or whether you just call it the market, but in this current market, if you're just yardsticking other deals, 65 plus 5 is not a bad deal. And I think in the end, this one may well get done because now the package, the valuation, and hopefully the structure will suit all parties.
Well, just as you were saying there about the price, and hopefully this will help us when we come to sell Garnacho with his price, because I know there was, a couple of low ball offers from Napoli, and Garnacho since has expressed that his desire to stay in the Premier League. I mean, whether that will materialise, we don't know. It's what I want to ask you about next. I mean, but Manchester United, they've had a relationship with Chelsea, they've had a relationship with Aston Villa. There's links towards to Emi Martinez, which you've kind of cooled down a little bit there. There was links towards Nicholas Jackson, which you've said, we have discussed within the club. And Garnacho has also been linked to both Chelsea, Aston Villa. I also saw him linked to Tottenham Hotspur as well. Is there any news on the Garnacho exit and any clubs kind of, circling Garnacho and ready to maybe go for him as we get into the later stages of the window?
Yeah, Garnacho wants a Premier League move. He's made no secret of that. Aston Villa could be one to watch. They're looking to strengthen on that left-hand side. We mentioned, obviously, Nicholas Jackson for Aston Villa as well. I think Chelsea as well. It might sound a strange thing to say because Jamie Gittins has come in, but Chelsea have basically got Pedro Neto, who prefers to play on the right. Noni Madueke is left for Arsenal. And then they've got Esteval Willian, who will likely be used on the right-hand side because Cole Palmer is going to be the starting 10. Then on the left-hand side, you've got Tyreek George, but he could be sent out on loan. You've got Jamie Gittins. And it maybe there's room for one more because Shivani Quenda is not arriving until 2026. Plus the fact that Garnacho can be a bit more versatile. I don't think he's loved playing in a more central role under Ruben Amorim, but the left wingers under Enzo Maresca are given a lot of freedom to cut into the box and play more centrally. So Chelsea haven't ruled out adding another attacker, and Garnacho can be one to watch for them as well. And even Tottenham, I've heard as well. So Matthias Tell, as I revealed exclusively, signed permanently, and that was always the plan. But they might add another left-sided attacker as well. And we need to keep an eye on Tottenham if Son, after a pre-season tour game in South Korea that he plans to play in against Newcastle on August the 3rd, then speaks to the club and says he wants to leave, and there is Saudi interest in Son, they will almost certainly add another left-sided player. So I think at the moment, it's either a case of, can a Chelsea go to Manchester United and persuade them on a Nicholas Jackson and do a mirrored deal? And then Garnacho, I think, will come up in conversation and you might get a mutually beneficial piece of business. And that's the kind of thing that could happen sooner rather than later, providing, of course, all parties agree that's the best approach. Remember, another option is Christopher Nkunku, who we know that Manchester United looked at in January. And again, if he was the topic of conversation, you'd probably get Garnacho coming up as going the other way. But if that doesn't happen, if there's not a two-way business, then I think you'll get a scenario where it may drag on a little bit because these clubs are going to hope that the Manchester United asking price drops, at least fractionally. I don't think Manchester United thinks 60 million is bad value for Garnacho because, again, as we've just referenced, you've got loads of players in the market moving for in and around that ballpark. But I think clubs, if they're going to do Garnacho as a standalone deal, because of the wage and because of what's happened at Manchester United and the urgency to resolve his future and get pure profit as well on the books, I think they're hoping that maybe the price might drop to closer to 55 million. And if that's the case, there might be a few more takers. And that's probably 55 million with add-ons, whereas I think Manchester United right now feels 60 is fair, and they'll do a Brentford to anyone that comes calling, and 60 might become 65, and 65 might become 65 million plus add-ons. And why not? Because you've got to play the other clubs at the same game they're playing. And this is probably another factor to look out for Jason Wilcox and Chris Vivell. Are they moving into this area where they're saying not just we're not paying a tax where possible on players, but when we sell, we're not going to be pushed against a wall. We're not going to just give Anthony a loan because he wants to go to Betis. We're not just going to give Rashford a loan because he wants to go to Barcelona. We're not going to let Napoli buy Garnacho back in January for 50 million euros when everyone knows the kind of player that Garnacho could become. And this is the sort of new Manchester United. They're going to be much tougher negotiators, even if there is need and urgency to bring in some money. And that's why I think the Garnacho situation hasn't developed in the last week or so. But once again, keep an eye on Villa and keep an eye on Chelsea.
Will be interesting to see where he ends up. We have some people talking in the chats again. We've got Pablo saying, if Ben mentions Jackson again, I might cry. Look, don't shoot the messenger, just giving the information. Eurovan says, praying for a here we go soon. Finally, some good news. J Law says, Ben, bringing good news. Deep dish pizza in Chicago on me. I mean, will you be around for any of the US tour, Ben, actually?
I might be out in the US towards the back end of the tour. I'm not staying for the opening game because I fly back on Thursday. But then in 2 weeks' time, I am back in America. So hopefully I will get to catch Manchester United. And hey, if there's the offer of a deep dish pizza in Chicago, then I'm all in. Well,
I'm joining. And it'll be on me, Ben, if you keep providing these transfer updates. I'll be joining. We could do a little live from Chicago, me and you, eh? And, if anyone, wants to join, get in the comments. George Mitchell says, I want Onana gone, but hopeful of our conceding will decrease with a second season of this new defence starting to gel. But Onana has to go. Lee Berman says, Ben, Jacobs, Cracker, and Scott Palmer says, can you ask if United can sell Garnacho to Villa for 60 million and we can sign Watkins for 60 million? Would that be good for PSR so we can sign more players?
Yeah, I mean, the PSR situation is interesting because we're still in, without boring people to death, a near-miss period. And what a near-miss period means is if you want to put your incoming money on the last financial year, even though the soft deadline has passed, if you can show that steps were taken to do the deal before the deadline, then in this grace period of 2 to 3 weeks, you can make an argument that mitigating circumstances stopped you from doing the deal when you wanted it. Perhaps the player was on holiday. Maybe you went out of your way to get it done, but there was a legal hitch or whatever. So then you can actually put that fee on the last financial year. But we're getting to the point now where there's like a cutoff. And effectively, by the end of this month, any business will be on this financial year. So that can be seen as bad news if you're worried about not being PSR compliant. But it also takes away the urgency of saying we desperately need the pure profit now. So if, as of today, Manchester United feel satisfied having closed their last financial year, then actually getting Garnacho pure profit is less important than just getting any money in so they can start moving in the market. These mirrored deals, which we saw 12 months ago, are few and far between. We're seeing a lot less of them. And we'll have to kind of understand whether to do a, let's just call it Watkins, because that was the example you gave. Manchester United feel they would need a Garnacho the other way. And if they do, is that simply down to income, or are they going to try and put it on the near miss period and declare that fee on the last financial year? And then the way it works with these mirrored deals and why they were done 12 months ago is when you get your sale, you can declare all of that on your annual books, whether for last year under that near miss example I gave, or whether for this financial year. And then when you buy, you can amortize and you can divide by up to 5. So if the contract is 5 years, you can spread the fee over 5 years for accounting purposes. It's known as amortization. You used to be able to do it for longer. Chelsea exploited that loophole and then UEFA have shut it. So you could technically offer a young player a 7-year deal, but you can only amortize the fee for book purposes over 5 years. So yeah, the short answer is that if Villa want Garnacho, Manchester United probably will ask about Ollie Watkins as part of due diligence, and then we have to wait and see whether it develops. And I still think there might be legs to Manchester United and Šeško as well.
Šeško. Keep an eye on that, everyone. Ben's mentioned it twice now. We'll have to wait and see on that. But it's good that Manchester United are exploring the striker market. And to be honest with you, as I started this show off a little bit down after coming back and not seeing much has happened. But with that Mbeumo third bid going in, it is, getting me a little bit more excited. And obviously, seeing other transfer targets come out, like you mentioned Šeško there, is a positive thing. I mean, speaking of other transfer targets, I saw you mention Estepinian again from Brighton. Is there been any updates on that? Is it something that could happen towards later stages of the window and Manchester United actively pushing for him?
They're in talks on the player side. Talks don't necessarily mean that a bid will materialise, but they're speaking to the player side, and they're doing so to understand his own desires for things like game time, because they're actually quite well covered on that left-hand side. But Luke Shaw obviously has had injuries. Leon is young. Dorgu's there. And I think that Ruben Amorim would like the idea of having another dynamic and athletic fullback come into the side. But it remains to be seen whether Estupiñán, for example, would automatically claim a spot as a starter over some of the other options. So I think that there's been an understanding on the player side of both terms and also the pathway that Manchester United might have in mind. And then because Brighton and Mbeumo and Brentford is clearly on the brain, because I'm getting lots of messages. Always difficult when you're live and you're trying to balance messages and accuracy and standing things up versus when we're outside of the window and you think, I can just not look at my phone because nothing's going to change in this hour, whereas things can change within 1 second here. But anyway, yeah, with Brighton, there's been no approach to them yet. There's been no bid to them yet. But Brighton might be prepared to sell because Maxime de Cooper has come in at left back. So they're also well covered now in that area. Estupiñán's made no secret that he wants a new challenge. My understanding is that he wants to stay in Europe rather than specifically the Premier League. And actually that Leverkusen really like him as well, which would be interesting because obviously Erik ten Hag is the manager there too. So let's sort of wait and see how it develops. You've got Milan, another club that I would throw into the mix. But Manchester United have definitely held talks and recent talks on the player side. It's just at this stage, I'm not aware that that's translated into club-to-club talks or any kind of bid.
Brilliant stuff. I mean, I think he's an exciting player. Injuries do worry me a little bit, but it's good to see that we're looking at that area because I do actually think wing-backs is an area that we need to strengthen. Ben, I also wanted to ask you about Jadon Sancho. More reports that he's getting closer to joining Juventus. Any updates on Sancho to Juventus? I mean, Rashford doesn't look like he's going anywhere as of now, but any updates on his exit? Anthony Malacia, basically any updates on the exits and in particular that Jadon Sancho to Juventus move?
Yeah, I think Juventus like Jadon Sancho. No problem with Manchester United. 25 million fee, maybe even close to 20 because the obligation for Chelsea was variable. It started at 20, it went up to 25. So something in that ballpark is going to be possible. But it's all on Sancho. And again, after several conversations, first with Napoli and then Juventus, Sancho wasn't able to agree terms. In the last kind of 48 hours, there has been a little bit of progress regarding the kind of package on offer from Juventus, but Sancho hasn't given a final green light yet. And it's a strange situation because Chelsea basically offered Sancho, to my understanding, the part of the wage that they were paying during that loan deal. So Manchester United were contributing about 120, 125,000. Chelsea were paying the rest. Chelsea essentially said, we'll stick to that number, but incentive driven. So that's your overall package in seasons with Champions League football. It diminishes by 20% in seasons without Champions League football. And parts of that overall package are earned and other parts are fixed. And Sancho said no. And Chelsea moved on and they paid the 5 million penalty. Once you know Chelsea can't agree terms with Sancho, it's quite hard for other clubs in Europe to match that. So the Juventus offer is nowhere near the Chelsea offer, which means that either Sancho is going to have to change his mind and reduce his wage, in which case there's a strong chance that Juventus in particular happens because Sancho is quite sold, I'm told, on that football project. Or if he wants the money, he basically has to go to Saudi Arabia. And there's a few clubs in Saudi Arabia that are still interested, but they haven't really had any green light or any encouragement from Sancho at this point. And that's where we stand. So keep an eye on Juventus in the next week or so because it could move. But this is still just all on Sancho and what package he's prepared to agree with any club. Manchester United will not be the roadblock here. They're prepared to sell for between 20 and 25 million.
Interesting stuff there. I mean, obviously it's up to Jadon Sancho, but I think Juventus would be a great move for him. Not just coming from a United fan that wants the business done. I genuinely do think that when you look at his playing style and the playing style over in Italy. And then the other outgoings seem to be a little bit slow at the moment. We'll see how they develop towards the later end of the window. Just to kind of wrap up there, Ben, do we have any last summary of where we're at on Bryan Mbeumo and and the expectations going ahead with this third bid being submitted?
Yeah, I think just the thing that I added, first of all, to confirm the David Ornstein story, which somehow I've been able to do on WhatsApp rather than having to run away and call people, although my phone definitely has a few calls that I need to return after this one.
I'll let you go.
Yeah, 65 million plus 5 million is the bid, as first reported by David Ornstein. And as we said before we knew that the bid had gone in, Manchester United had a bit more urgency. They're aware that if someone gets Wissa first, it makes the Mbeumo deal a whole lot harder. So, like I said at the very beginning of the show, before the bid news even came out, in a weird way, it's been a backhanded positive for Manchester United that Ekitike looks like he's going to Liverpool, Newcastle are entering the race for Wissa, along with Spurs and Nottingham Forest, and Man United feel two things. Number one, they need to move, because if they get Mbeumo done first, they're in a stronger position and it weakens the chances of those other clubs for Wissa. Doesn't rule it out entirely, but it weakens the position of those other clubs. And then the second thing is, as I reported earlier in the week, Manchester United were always hoping, despite reports of the deal stalling or a goal from valuation, to get Mbeumo in time for their pre-season tour. And again, the urgency of this latest bid shows that. Then the bits that I can add, Manchester United consider their third bid for Bryan Mbeumo as final. So they're prepared to engage around it, if not outright accepted, but they're not anticipating a significant hike in valuation from this point. So don't panic, therefore, if Brentford don't accept it or counter, because there is a difference between you're nowhere near, we're rejecting it, and then everyone panics, obviously. And then my understanding is in that scenario, Manchester United would say, okay, we're moving on to other targets now. But there is a situation where Brentford could say, it's not quite there, but here's what you've got to do to get an acceptance. And that's very different, because that's not Manchester United walking away or going up in valuation. That's Manchester United saying, okay, we're prepared to finesse it. We've got the ballpark of a deal. So, for example, 65 may be acceptable, but not the payment terms. 5 million may be acceptable, but not the gettable nature of the add-ons, which is kind of what's happening with the add-ons with Victor Gyökeres at the moment and Arsenal. And that's the situation right now, I sense. Man United are waiting for an answer. Maybe it is just accepted and then this saga ends. But if Brentford say no, still not there, then as long as they're prepared to engage around this ballpark, Manchester United will continue with optimism, and I am told they're optimistic, to get this over the line. If Brentford, as I'm told live now, say nowhere near, he's now 75, he's now 80 million, then at that point I'm told Manchester United will walk away.
Well, let's hope that Brentford accept that offer, or at least, give us some indication that we're along the right lines. But ideally, accept. Please, Brentford, accept that offer. But look, Ben, thank you so much for all the updates you provided us, and multitasking live on air as well. I know it's super tough, but you are amazing, and thank you for bringing us all the updates live. I know that you have phone calls you've got to make, and you've been delaying them while you've been live with us. So the viewers, thank Ben for that and giving us the transfer updates live. It's been a great show, a great first show to be back after over a week as well. And hopefully we'll catch up more in the US tour as we watch Mbeumo hopefully playing in a Man United shirt. That's what we like to see. Just the last few comments from you guys. Mojo says Garnacho for Watkins and Martinez. And we have Kevin saying, I'm happy we're finally making progress, but we could have gone in with 65 million euros much earlier. We held back to make a statement by not overbidding, but at this point, what statement are we even making? I mean, I think that's a bit of a fair comment, but I'm just hoping that it gets accepted. But look, Ben, thank you very much. I'll leave you to go and get them phone calls in. I'll be looking forward to hear the updates and hopefully a positive answer from Brentford. Yeah, let's hope so. I'll update you as soon as I can, and always a pleasure. Speak next week. Amazing. Smash a like on the video for Ben, everyone. And Goldbridge is coming up right now with his reaction. So after this video, it's going to take you straight over to Goldbridge reacting to the newest bid from Manchester United for Bryan Mbeumo. Thank you, everyone, for welcoming me back, and we'll see you on the next one.